guys ready for your second speaker of the night? Let's go evangelical preacher on y'all. I'm gonna need a little bit more energy. Y'all ready for your second speaker of the night? Yeah! He also has a player haters degree from University Hospital Basel in Switzerland. He's postdoctoral research fellow at Moffitt. And he likes long walks on the beach. Let's give it up for Franz Schaub.
Hi everyone, my name is Franz Schaub, and probably as you already guess, my accent is not really from Tampa, but so I did my PhD back in Switzerland. I moved to the US 5 years ago, but it was still not long enough to get rid of my accent, so you have to listen to this German Swiss accent for a while now. So, but I hope you can still understand me. So today I will talk about what cancer is actually eating, because whatever the cancer is eating is actually what you are eating. So I just get it there through a couple of things. But first, before we start, is we're talking about cancer, but cancer comes from our cells, and some things have to change. So what do you think, what does the cancer has to get to become cancer? What do you think are the qualities or the characteristics that cancer has to acquire to become a cancer? Because at the beginning it was always a normal cell in your body.
Free radicals.
Sorry?
Free radicals?
Yeah, that's a way to induce it. But what do you think what cancer needs to grow fast? Or what does it need? Nutrients, that's a good point. But the whole body gets nutrients. So what does the cancer make it different? Why is the cancer different? Glucose is a very good point, but your brain is eating glucose, and normally even if you have crazy thoughts, it's still another cancer. So there are a lot of things that cancer has to acquire while it develops in your body. So it has to grow without stopping. So all of your cells in your body have a lot of mechanisms which stop them from growing. And the cancer cell has to shut off all those mechanisms to stop growing. And what else you think was important for cancer cells? Sorry? Exactly. So oh, sorry. Oh my God, now I can hear myself too. So exactly, mutations. I think mutations are very important because that's what changes the tumor. And it's the genomic instability which then leads to acquisition of even more mutations. And in recent days, there's something which we came aware of, and it's the immune system. You can imagine that we have all immune system which stops us from getting a lot of disease from bacteria and virus. But actually what the cancer has to do is it also has to escape the immune system. That's another characteristic the cancer has to acquire to grow inside us. And then what I want to really talk about today is actually how the cancer is able to get a lot of energy to grow fast, and how it's able to change all the metabolic pathways inside the cells, to take all the energy and to turn it into a fast-growing cells. And somebody mentioned before is the glucose. And that's something which we know for many years. It was Warburg, I think it was in the 1940s or 30s, where he discovered that cancer cells actually eat a lot of glucose. They take glucose, and surprisingly, they don't use it in a very smart way. They only use it in an anaerobic way without using oxygen. And that gives them only 2 ATPs, which are actually the energy molecules in the cell. If they would use oxygen to further digest the glucose, they would get 36 pieces of ATP, which would be much better. But for some reason, the cancer is really stupid and only uses this one way and only gets 2 pieces of ATP out of it. But it really helps us to diagnose cancer, everybody probably heard about PET scans, where people get radio-labeled glucose injected in their bodies, and because the cancer is using so much glucose, we can then really see where this glucose accumulates, and then we can find where the cancer is spreading, and that really helps us. But recently, people realized that glucose is not the whole story. They did used isotopes of different molecules and gave these isotopes to the cancer to eat. And then they were able to realize that glucose is only contributing 5% of the cell mass of a cancer cell. So even though the cancer cell is using all those glucose, it's only 5% of the actual glucose biomass inside the cell is coming from glucose. And they realized that amino acids are making up the most part of the cell. And amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And proteins, as you heard before, are the major part of the cell. So, and amino acids we have to eat every day. We eat them with the meat, with the vegetables, with everything you eat. We are taking up amino acids. And some of the amino acids we can actually produce ourselves. And some other amino acids we have to eat. So these are called essential amino acids. And interestingly, some of the essential amino acids are actually produced by our microbiome. You know that everybody has billions and trillions of microbes in your gut. And those help to digest your food, and they also producing the essential amino acids for you. So with the amino acids we eat, the amino acids that the microbiome is producing, they're all building up the amino acids we take, which are needed for our cells. So now, in a cell, we have to somehow get those amino acids inside the cell. And there are specific molecules on the cell which can take up those amino acids. And then also, cells can eat proteins which are made up from multiple amino acids, and they can then take inside the cell and digest them and produce more free amino acids. So the cells in our body have to constantly take up those amino acids. So by the way, interrupt me at any point if you have any questions. So that's the best way to do it. So it's also I never present it without slides where you show all those fancy graphs and suddenly you have to talk without those graphs. So that's not very easy. So forgive me if I'm not always that clear. So just when you have a question, just ask right out. So so we have now those amino acids. But it's not enough for our cells to just take up the amino acids. There are also mechanisms inside the cell which can recycle amino acids. And one of those processes is called self-eating. It's called the autophagy pathway. And what happens is that inside the cell, if you don't need proteins anymore, they get capsuled in an organelle and get digested. So it's like a recycling pathway. And then there's also the proteasome pathway, which takes protein and digests them and put them back into single amino acids. So what we have to take home from this whole thing is that we always need free amino acids in our cell. And cancer cells need a lot of them because they need to constantly produce new proteins, and they have to get a lot of those free amino acids. So I started to look into this pathway of the self-eating, and I realized that the transcription factor, the control enzyme which controls autophagy, and the one enzyme, the MYC oncogene, which is a oncogene which drives the tumor growth, are very similar. And then I realized that if you have a tumor with the MYC protein in there, that these cells don't have this self-eating process anymore. So now to make a long story short is that like now we have this fast-growing cell which needs tons of those amino acids, free amino acids in the cell, but for some reason it blocks one of the most important pathways. So now like we try to understand what that means for the cell. And what we realized is that like if you take cells and remove the amino acids, if you do that with a normal cell, they are happy, nothing happens. But if you do that with like a cancer cell, they suddenly all die because remove the amino acids because they cannot get them on their own. So they really highly depend on the viability of free amino acids. So we thought, okay, great, we just gonna change the diet and then we don't gonna get cancer. So, so that's what we did. We used a model of cancer in mice and we changed their diet. So we had one group of mice with cancer which we gave high protein diet. That's like eating a big steak every day. And then we had a second group of cells which we gave a low protein diet. That's like the Mediterranean diet where you only eat pasta. And then no meat, and so you get very little protein. And then we wanted to see what the cancer cells do in those mice. And to our happiness, or like we're really excited to see that the cells which got the low protein diet, the mice which got the low protein diet, had less cancer cells. And we were really excited to see that, and we saw that after only 1 week of feeding them the different diet, we see a strong reduction of those cancer cells in the mice. And we're so excited, we said, okay, let's go back. And 1 week later, we wanted to look, 2 weeks later, we wanted to look again at those cancer cells. But what happened? It was perfectly happy. They grew and everything was normal. So, and even if we looked at the survival of those mice, even they got the low protein diet and the high protein diet, realized they all grow the same. That was really disappointing, but we then like thought, okay, like cancer cells, they always try to survive, and it's a constant evolution going on inside in a cancer population. So it's like similar to evolution where only the fittest survive. So what happens when we expose those mice to the low and high protein diet, that there's an evolution happening. And so we select for a population which can survive with less proteins in their diet. And so we went back and thought, okay, what are tumor cells doing to survive better? And then we realized that they activate other pathways to get the free amino acids inside the cells. And one of the ways was the proteasome. As I mentioned before, that's the pathway which digests proteins. And happily, like luckily, there are inhibitors out there which actually target this pathway. And then if we use those inhibitors on the tumor cells, they were really sensitive to those inhibitors, showing that because they lack one pathway, they have to go and use another pathway. So that really explains why those cells can be treated with these inhibitors. And nowadays, there are multiple clinical trials where they're using these compounds to treat tumors which rely on a specific oncogene. But then, like, we went back to our mice and like thought, okay, they went through a selective process where they were exposed to low amount of proteins, and let's see what happens with those tumors. So when the mice got tumors, we harvested the tumors and were growing them and tried to see what makes them different. And we realized during the development that the mice like the tumors growing in those mice were completely different between the two diets. So they acquired mutations and changes in the DNA which made them more adapted to one or the other diet. And that means, like, that's what I mean, like when I put up the title and said, the tumor eats off your plate. That's basically what happens is like you have a tumor cell in your body, and meanwhile the tumor develops. It goes through a whole evolution. And meanwhile that happens, it basically eats what you're eating. It depends on your diet how the tumor is shaped. So like this adds a whole complexity. Probably already heard about all these different kind of mutations tumor get, but there's an additional level of complexity where the diet you eat actually affects how your tumor is shaped at the end. So meaning like somebody who is eating a lot of meat is going to have a tumor, different tumor than somebody eating a lot of pasta. But both are going to get a tumor. It's just like how we're going to treat the tumor is going to be different. And I think that's where the whole field is going to move to, because we will be able to take biopsies from tumors and look at it and say, this tumor is relying much more on this diet or this metabolic substrate compared to another tumor. So this will really help us to really design treatments which are specific for one patient and only one patient, and by just looking at how is the metabolic profile. But at the end, like at the end, it's still important, like the diet still has an effect. There's a lot of information out there which points towards that a healthy diet is actually helping you to prevent cancer. For example, insulin, like if you have high levels of insulin, if you get diabetes caused by unhealthy diet, where you eat a lot of sugar and you get resistant to insulin, these high levels of insulin can cause cancer. So at the end, it's like a balanced diet which really helps to prevent cancer. But once you have a cancer cell in your body, it will find its own way to take whatever nutrients are in your blood to survive. And we really but we can take this to an advantage and really found the vulnerabilities of each tumors to target it. So probably I put a whole list of points I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure, I didn't look at it at all, so I'm not sure whether I covered all of it. But let's just if you have any questions, please ask.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you have an inhibitor. If someone is on a high-carb, low-protein diet, they use another pathway, but you have an inhibitor for that pathway. So couldn't you modify the patient's diet to go to a drug, or vice versa? Do you have an inhibitor for a low-carb, high-protein diet? So if someone's diabetic, for example, they couldn't switch their diet to a high-carb. I work with diabetes research, just to let you know, so I'm very interested in that. So they couldn't switch to that, but do you have the inhibitor? I'm thinking treatment options. We always talk about diet and how it affects. So if you have that inhibitor, could you just alter the patient's diet? Of course, if you're in a position, but you encourage that.
I guess, yeah, it's probably you cannot say you're going to starve the tumor. There are a lot of ideas out there where people say, oh, don't eat any sugar and your tumor is going to go away. That's not how it works. The tumor is way too smart to just say, oh, don't get sugar, I'm going to take something else. But as soon as you're going to cut off 2 sources or 3 sources, then you can really target the tumor. And I always like to use an example from evolution where it's called the Squirrel Dilemma. So the squirrel, you can imagine a squirrel is running around, and depending where the squirrel is, for example, if the squirrel is around the house, you introduce the cat from the house, and which could eat the squirrel. And then the squirrel has to find another place to live. And then it runs out on the open field. And then you introduce a hawk or like an eagle which can grab the squirrel in the open field. And then the squirrel thinks, okay, I'm running up on the tree. And you just have to introduce a snake which is going to eat the squirrel in the tree. So basically that's what you have to do, is that's just like cut off all the supplies, either by diet, by inhibitors, really to cut off all the supplies and give the tumor no option to go for on the end. Yeah? Okay, I think it's just a little bit loose down here. Okay. Okay.
Franz, first of all, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. So, you talked about the experiment with the mice where you had one set of mice who had a tumor with a high protein diet, and then another with a set of mice who had a low protein diet. Now, the low protein diet initially had a halt in the cancer, but then after about a week, it leveled out. So is there any indication that maybe giving them a low protein diet where the cancer adjusts to that, then a high protein diet, or adjusting the diet at certain intervals has any effect on the growth of it, whether slowing it down or halting it?
I guess like once they get adapted to low protein diet, they don't really care if they get tons of protein because they're already happy with low protein. But once they adapt it, we might be able to find pathways we can attack, which they suddenly rely on and they didn't rely on before. So I guess like having low protein diet and then maybe they activate a pathway, and maybe you already have an inhibitor which helps them to block that pathway too. But you have to also be aware that those adaptations, we see them in mice because we know when they get cancer. But the problem is in humans is we don't know when we get the cancer. We only know it when it's already too late, or when the cancer went already through the whole evolution. So I guess that's a little bit different in this situation. But maybe like going back and say, looking at people and say, okay, you had a different diet than the other one, maybe that helps us to understand the cancer in that specific person better.
Okay.
Are there combinations of people who partake in certain diets that are less commonly afflicted by cancer?
There are kind of studies. There's some studies in the Mediterranean diet. There is some large studies there, which seems like that people following a Mediterranean diet get less cancer, but maybe that's really connected to the amount of protein, animal protein they eat. So there are like data out there which points towards that, yeah.
That was kind of my question. Is there a difference between animal-based protein and vegetable-based protein?
Actually, there is. There are a lot of studies out there and where they really showed that, because I remember I was talking about the amino acids, which are the building blocks of the proteins, and we have 20 of those. And the animal protein has a different, like if you take total animal protein, there's a different percentage of each amino acids in animal protein than in plant protein. So there's data out there that the composition of plant amino acids is less tumor promoting than the animal proteins. So there's data pointing towards that plant proteins are healthier than the animal proteins.
Question. So you say you introduce different amino acids to the cancer cells, but within amino acid you have the hydrophilic, hydrophobic, charge, neutral. Have you tried to incubate the groups of different amino acids with the cancer cells to see which kind of amino acid actually promotes the growth better?
I haven't looked into like different subgroups. What I really look like just taking away all the amino acids, just limiting amino acids in general. But I'm thinking that there will be for sure differences, because like the different amino acids get synthesized differently, like certain, they may rely more on one amino acid than the other. And then we have also the essential amino acids which our body cannot synthesize and which we have to eat. So I think there are for sure difference between the different amino acids.
So, hey Franz,
So when we walk into the market, for example, there's tons of products that advertise antioxidants, and all these health benefits. If you eat these things, like blueberries and whatever is that particular fad at that moment, maybe it's pomegranate seeds. But is there any actual substantial scientific research that would support eating an excessive amount of those particular items and maybe fighting or maybe prepping your body to be better suited for fighting off cancer?
I think like ROS is a big topic because ROS are oxygens in your cells which are actually reactive, so there's O minus, so they can react with the DNA and cause mutations. So there's a lot of data out there pointing out that if you try to limit the amount of ROS, then you get less mutations. But then there's also the ROS is kind of a two-sided sword. Before you have cancer, you want to have as little ROS as you want, because then you get less mutation. But once you have cancer, cancer cells actually producing a lot of ROS. And then if you reduce the amount of ROS, you're actually helping the cancer cells. So eating all the healthy things, why you don't have cancer, it's perfect, it really helps you. But at the end, it's a combination of a healthy diet where you have all kinds of, not a one-sided diet where you combine all kinds of things. And for sure, adding healthy fruits with ROS, which helps you reducing ROS, I think that's for sure healthy. But it's a good way to combine everything together and have a healthy, balanced diet, yeah.
So taking into account all the things that you mentioned about cancer cells need to survive and proliferate and grow, do you have for any particular dietary advice for people that come from a cancer research lab?
I guess at the end, it's always hard because at the end, the best is for your body is to have a balanced diet and get a little bit from everything. More importantly is move and stay healthy. I guess keeping your body moving and have a healthy body is the best part of it. It's not you only eat this, because as soon you're going to go have a one-sided diet, it's not going to be good. It's just a healthy diet, move a lot, stay healthy and exercise and all these things, which whatever is healthy for your heart, for your body, is also keep your cancer away. So I think that's easy.
There are a lot of things out there as alternative therapies to conventional medical therapies, such as juicing and dietary regimens. And these things are not in themselves unhealthy, but as an expert in this field, you wouldn't recommend ignoring medical advice in lieu of diet.
Absolutely, that goes back to the idea which came from the back there, where you have to target multiple pathways. If you're just removing one nutrient, you're not going to affect the cancer. If you're only going to choose and have vegetables, you're not going to get rid of the cancer. And then there's another important part which we learn more and more is the immune system, because the immune system takes an important part of fighting your cancer. And you can imagine once you're only going to choose and have a limited amount of nutrients to your body, you're also going to affect your immune system. And immediately immune system cannot target your cancer anymore. And that's really dangerous, just to say, oh, I'm going to starve my cancer. It's not going to work, because the cancer is always going to be smart and finds another way to get the nutrients. But it's the rest of your body which is then lacking the nutrients, which then cannot fight the cancer. So that's very important to keep a balanced diet and really help the immune system, the rest of the body to fight the cancer, and not by just removing all the nutrients and saying I'm starving my cancer. That's not going to help it. Perfect. I think I'm on time. Thank you so much. Thank you.